there's a moment towards the end where Farzana gets a little bit emotional when she's talking about her experiences. But for the most part, it seems like a lot of people featured in this film talk about their experiences very matter-of-factly. Was that something that surprised you, that what they've experienced is something that they've come to terms with, to the point where they don't really get emotional when they talk about it?
Yeah, that definitely. I don't know if it surprised me necessarily, because I mean, I think trauma is a weird thing. Like, you can interact with a stranger, and this is like part of being a journalist or a filmmaker or someone with a camera or a notepad or whatever it is that says like, I'm this third party kind of non-human thing, where people kind of spill their stories to you if they've been through trauma, and that's happened in other circumstances too, where, you know, if people don't always know the best way to like wrap up their trauma with a bow and like tell. So sometimes you just hear these stories, and I was actually thinking a lot about this for whatever reason this week, the fact that we didn't really, even outside of the 4 subjects, like I can't remember interacting with someone who didn't see something or experience something really, really harrowing and really like raw, because of just the sheer number of years of war in that country. And like we had, you know, we'd hear stories from our fixer, our translator and fixer would just tell us stories about being part of the Red Cross, Red Crescent during the Civil War, and trying to, you know, drive the ambulance through getting like, you know, bombed and shelled and stuff like that. And we were like, oh, well, that's, in my mind, you know, I'm like, oh, well, that's because you were in the force of, like, you were out there doing that stuff. You know, you were like in an NGO. But in reality, you talk to really anybody, and we had a fill-in fixer kind of for one day, this man named Wasim, who was very kind. And we're all just driving along on the road, and he's like, oh, here's the part of the road where, you know, I remember, because that school is right there. We were going to Panjshir with Wakil, and we were like driving, and he's like, right here is where the Soviets shot our car because we didn't stop, because we didn't know what they were asking us to do, and everyone in the car was shot, and the guy next to me was shot right here. And he's like, starts explaining the story of everyone in this car dying and him surviving, and it is so matter of fact. I think that story like sticks with me. I'm like, this is trauma. Like, you don't even like, you know, but it's something that people get somewhat used to, and they also just kind of want to share it, to like be like, yeah, this is what life is. And at the same time, well, I don't know, I think it'd be interesting for you to talk about Farzana. Like, when they came to visit, they came to the United States and on the festival circuit with us for a little bit, and we got to hang out with them as just like friends, which was amazing, and get to know them on this like different level. And Alexandria one day was like, we were goofing around with Farzana. She was like twirling and laughing in the elevator or something. And Alexandria like turned to me like a couple days later and was like, I just forget that she's like our age, and she's a silly human the way that we're silly sometimes. And we just because of like the number of things she's been through and the stuff that we've heard, you almost forget it, but then it makes so much sense when you connect with it.
And I think it was really interesting for Farzana and Masood the first time they saw the film. It was just off my laptop, and they were talking through most of it, just embarrassed of how they looked. She was mortified that she got caught renting Hangover 2. She like, that's all she could say through most of this film. She was like, really, why that film? So many films. And so that was really interesting to see her go through that. And then, you know, towards the end of the film, it's much more serious, and they kind of just stayed quiet for like 2 minutes after the credits, and I'm just like waiting for them to say something, just not able to breathe. And then they kind of, the tension kind of dissipated in the room, and they liked the film. But I don't think it was really until they sat with an audience to see it that these people are working so hard, and they're working every day, and it's so much, there's so many things that happen in Afghanistan all the time that you're having to get over all these different traumas. And it was a really interesting thing, kind of putting it in their face, and not only that, but they saw the film for the first time at Hot Docs, and there was this 400 people, hearing them sigh, hearing them gasp, hearing them laugh, hearing silence when she's picking up the camera, I think had a huge effect on them. And when they got up on stage, there was a standing ovation. I mean, being presented with that reality was something that was fascinating to watch, and I think it was really a heavy process.